Hello. All right. Let's see if I can make this work. All right. Are y'all seeing that? Okay, cool. Hello, I'm Emie, and I wrote a novel. It's called Queens Full of Aces, and it ended up being about 80,000 words. And I printed it out because I like to see it and look at it and think, oh, I did that. That was me. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna walk you through a quick summary of what happens in the novel before I talk about my process of how I created it. And I have a little bit of art that I did of the main character. So the summary is, a city whose leaders were made rich by an exclusive deal with a sand mining monopoly hosts an annual athletic competition to keep the hopeless people in the tenements happy. The young leader of a smuggling operation, this girl, and her estranged brother pull together a team of people from their childhoods and enter into the competition in hopes of winning the cash prize. But they quickly realize they're in over their heads. Even as they start to succeed, dark parts of their past start to come to light, and the rich and powerful use them as pawns in their games. The tournament starts to become all too real as more of them get injured, and the betrayals from their city's leaders start to add up. That's like the summary without too many spoilers. So about the project, my original idea was 50,000 or a little bit more words, and I was going to write all of it in November and then edit and revise throughout the year. And I officially started on November 1st, 2020 with this goal in mind. Plans change, obviously. It ended up being 80,000 words, and it was written mainly in November, but also mainly in April. And since I wrote it in April, I have not edited or revised any of it yet. And I officially finished it May 2nd, 2021. So I got in right under the wire with this one. Why write a novel? Why did I choose to write a novel? I wanted to explore themes of classism, familial relationships, and reconciliation after periods of separation. So what it means for someone to leave your life and what it means for them to come back into it. I wanted to contextualize current events and modern issues. I started writing this right around the time of the 2020 election, and there was a lot to unpack there. And I wanted to explore that through my writing. And I also wanted to practice writing in a different format. This is almost twice as long as anything I've ever written before. And so I really wanted to see what it was like to stretch something out over a longer period. And also because it's fun and I like to write, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't like to do it. So the idea generation process, I'm going to walk you through like each step of my process down to the writing. First, I wanted to generate ideas. I do all of my idea generation on Pinterest, and that allowed me to get a visual sense of the characters in the world before I had to actually plot things out and have events that would happen. So I had all of these different characters floating around, sometimes without names for a while before I started plotting. Then I got into plotting. I hate plotting a lot. But for this project, I thought I need to push myself out of my comfort zone, and also plotting is a thing that writers do, so I better plot some stuff out. I ended up abandoning the plot I had about halfway through, but I still had it at some point plotted out. And then I got into writing, which is my favorite part of the process. It ended up splitting into 2 stages, November and April. In November, I had a daily word count goal that I was trying to hit. I ended up stopping around the 20K mark because I got my wisdom teeth out and didn't want to write after I got my wisdom teeth out. And I continued writing on and off for the next few months. I ended up with about 35,000 words, and I was a little less than halfway through the story. I just got really burnt out around college apps and school, and I just dropped the project, and I didn't know if I was going to pick it back up again. And I eventually did pick it back up in April. I set another word count goal, and this time I stuck through it all the way through the end of the month. I developed the story much further, so much further that I ended up having more plot points than words that I needed to hit. So I ended up having to like condense parts of the story down and change it to cut things out rather than adding things in, which isn't something that's ever happened to me before. I finished a few days after April ended, and I finally settled on an ending. I didn't know what I wanted the ending to be. That I didn't know if I wanted a happy or sad ending right up until the end. I had 2 ways it could go, and I finally settled on the sad one. So what I learned from this process, personally, I am not a plotting person. Jack calls it writing your way into it, and I have to do this with essays, and I now know with fiction that I can't go into it with a plan. I have to find my plan and then do a lot of rewriting after I have found the plan already. Even if you only write a few words a day, it's better than giving up. And even if those words aren't great, it's still better than giving up. That was something that I really struggled with, and that I am kind of sad about that period that I took off. And I wish that I could have just kept pushing through, even if it wasn't my best work. Okay, I thought I heard an echo, sorry. No one's first draft is exempt from being first drafty. Not even me, not even you, no one. And I think sometimes I take no one as everyone but me, but really, it's going to be like a bad first draft with weird parts that I don't want to keep. And that's what a first draft is. And like, that was kind of a lesson that should be obvious, but that I still had to learn. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Some of my favorite parts of the story are I was sitting with Johnny and Art, and I was like, Johnny, what would you want to happen in this story? And he gave me a few ideas, and it ended up sending me writing for a while. Or I go walk out to my family and be like, what are y'all's thoughts? And asking for help in that way was really helpful, for lack of a better word. Sometimes you have to go there and it can't all be happy. I don't like writing sad things, but I was essentially writing a tragedy from the beginning, and I would have to write the sad ending eventually. And realizing that the story just wasn't the same if it ended on a very happy, watered down note was something that was important, but also hard to realize. But I'm also really happy with how I ended it. This is just something that I think is interesting. These are just all some different like cover mock-ups that I've done, but I think you can see the different ways my story has changed through the different covers I was going to give it, because I had all of these different ideas. I had like 4 different titles, and I just wasn't sure what I wanted for it, both in writing and also in these designs. And that's it. Thank you so much. Yes, yeah. Yeah, so the question was, did I do it as part of National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo? Yeah, I haven't done NaNoWriMo since I was like 15, and I decided that this would be a fun time to do it again. And I do think it was helpful. I think realizing that at the end of the month, you've just written so many words in 1 month, and it's not going to be, they're not all going to be great words, but that they're still going to be there, and then there's still something there is, it's always been really helpful for me. I like having those kind of deadlines and stuff like that. Yeah, Lawrence. Lawrence's question was how is this different than other projects I've done? I think more than any other project, I did a lot of research into our world in order to create the world of the story. I a lot of times maybe would draw inspiration from things happening in our world, but in this one, I was really spending a lot of time exposing myself to kind of news and information about our government and our economy and what that would look like in this kind of dystopian sense, or in this, if this world was different, how would these parts of the world be different? Yeah, and as someone who usually like writes very like fantasy that's not really like our world, that was really interesting. Oh, I can do that. Awesome. Oh my gosh. I got a friend of mine to make me a soundtrack, and it ended up having a bunch of 80s music on it, which for some reason just worked, and now is always what I associate with this project. So when I hear like the should I stay or should I go, like I'm like, ah, that's this project. Like, yeah, it was a lot of 80s music. I Oh yeah. Does the art inspire the words, or the words inspire the art? I think the words inspire the art, but they don't inspire the art well. I talked to Johnny about this a lot because I was having a ton of trouble sketching out any designs for these characters. And I was realizing it's told from a first person point of view. And I was saying that it feels like this is me in some ways, even though I'm nothing like the main character. I put on her persona to write, and it's hard to self-reflect. And in the same way, it's hard to reflect on this main character that it's from her point of view. So it was very hard to create art about it. But it was cool and a different process than I think I usually do. Interesting. I think, yes, it is. I think that it is one of the only projects I've actually finished. I usually do like the I got halfway and gave up thing. So finishing the project and how long it was and how attached I am to the characters. And yeah, I would say it's definitely my favorite project. The hardest thing about writing it was definitely spoilers, but there is a scene at the end where the main character's brother dies, and I just could not touch that scene. I wrote everything before it and everything after it, and I was like, I have to write this scene. That's what happens, and I just didn't want to touch it. And I eventually just sat down and just put on music and tried not to think about. That's something that people talk a lot about in acting is don't think about that you're acting, just do it. And so I just did it, for lack of a better word. I don't know if that's the best advice, but just getting out of my head and starting to put words on the paper. And then as I started to do that, they just came faster and faster. All right. Thank you all so much.